So now quickly, I'm just going to give you sort of 7 rules for innovation. And these are important, and you don't have to try and write this down. I'll be happy to supply them to Diane or whatever. So number 1 is you can't do everything. So you need to pick your shots, and you need to focus on a few things. And the best and smartest people are people who say no. Okay? They're not people who try everything. They're people who are great editors, great choosers, great people who pick a few things and understand that it's very easy to get spread a mile wide and an inch deep, and that's a formula for mediocrity. So the thought is pick a few things, focus on those, okay? Understand that there's always crises. You can't let your inbox, be dictated by people dumping things on you. You have to have a strategy. You have to focus on what you can do and what's important. And you can't have too many of these things. I think if he didn't say this, he meant to say this, okay? And it sounds like the kind of thing that Confucius would say. I mean, but the idea is really that, and that is that we can't be everything. So we have to really pick a few important things. Now, here's what's also important. It's important to have this vision, but it's also important to understand that the job is to manage through constantly changing circumstances, constantly new challenges. And so you have to be iron on your vision, on where you're going, on how important the results are, care, and these various things. You have to be completely flexible, and you can't be bound by the way that you used to do these things. So that's number 1, is a few really important things. Number 2 is to get started. Because if you don't get started, if you don't understand that you need to start to progress and then to go forward from there, basically you're not going to be successful. And here's the truth. Waiting doesn't get to a better answer. Elaboration and giant business plans and all kinds of projections and things doesn't get you there either. When I was in the film business, we always said the same thing. We said that the screenplay, the proposal, is what got the movie made. There was no question. It was what got the funding done. But it was never the movie that ended up on the screen. And so it was just a guide. It was just a plan. And the minute that you write something down, it's old and it's tired. And so the thought that you understand that and know how to work with that kind of stuff is really important to the innovation process. It's also important to understand that you can't focus so much on the numbers that you lose sight of the goal and the dream and the plan. And so there are companies that are great innovators, and they have crazy, crazy rules. Casio was like every 30 days we're going to ship a new watch. Even if somebody told them that on the 32nd day, the watch would cure cancer, taste like chocolate, and cost $1, they'd say that'll be next month's watch. They had that discipline that kept them moving forward, not waiting and postponing it. And so that idea is really, really significant. And getting some stuff done is better than thinking that anything can be perfect. You want to keep moving forward, and that's really important. So there's a right way to do this. You find out what the problems are, what are the real pain points. You find out that it's valuable, has economic value, that people are willing to pay for it, that it's important to invest your scarce time and resources in it. And then you build a product that's good enough to get started, and then you constantly get better. And it's this process of iteration, and it's an unending process, and it's the thing that has been probably the best thing that we have done is to build this methodology, which is almost like engineering, into the way that we work with our startups. So speed, always better than trying to be perfect. Number 3, I said this before, and that's that there's a million people who will tell you why you can't do something, why it won't work. If you give up on yourself, then you can be assured that you won't be successful. So the other part of that is that it doesn't happen overnight. That's okay. People understand that. Think of a slinky, okay? And again, those of us of a certain age understand what that is. This is like if you ask kids under 25 what's a watch, they don't know. And then when you challenge them and you say, but it's a watch, they say, well, it's a single function device. And I always say, well, it tells the date also, so it's not really a single function device. And they say, well, we still prefer our phone. But the slinky is about momentum, and that's how these things work. It takes a while. You sort of get the ball moving, and then eventually everything catches up with you. So it doesn't happen overnight. You don't want to try and jump these huge gaps. You want it to be a continuous process, okay? And there are some things that you just can't accomplish as much as an entire group, sort of a minion of women, still can't, whatever. Anyway, so nail it first. Get a good idea, make it happen in a test, make it happen in a small scale, make it happen in a pilot, then grow. Plenty of time to grow and get better and get larger. The trick is to get good first and then to go from there. And then I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of plans and vision, because we do make these plans. It's sort of the process of governance. We have to make these plans, but we also have to understand that there's this idea, and it's absolutely true. If you're benchmarking, if you're measuring against something that was written in stone one day, but things have changed, it doesn't really do you a world of good. And so our goal is to always understand and know how to use a business plan. And here's what you do. You use the plan that you wrote for January 1st as a tool. It's not the gospel. It's not, something that is perfect. It's a tool, and what you measure is how good were we at guessing what was going to come down the pipe. And how did we have to change, and how did we have to react, and what's appropriate as we move forward, because we don't have any leverage in the past. We can only react to the present, but we can change the future. And that's where leverage exists. And so this idea of navigation is really, really significant. You can't sort of say, oh, I wish that the circumstances were different. You can't say, well, it's important to be consistent, because that means you haven't learned anything. And learning is an iterative and ongoing process, so really, really critical. And frankly, gray hair is a sign of age. I know this myself. Not necessarily wisdom. And experience is significant, but it can't be the be-all and the end-all, because the way change is occurring today, experience is not the most helpful thing. It's just one of the components. Things are changing, not just sort of marginally, they're changing in dramatic and disruptive ways. And so think of the last time you sent the fax, and think of the things that we took for granted for so very, very long, and hopefully more and more of this stuff is disappearing, from the way we do things. And then there's this issue of the math, okay? I don't know about you, I've watched a lot of Academy Awards, even the guys from Ernst & Young ever say it's deserving of this because they brought in $3 under budget, okay? It's about results, it's really not about the math, and the math will only take you so far, and then it's people. It's people, and it's the vision, and it's the idea. That's really what's going to happen. Mistakes I mentioned before, they're great. You have to understand that you're going to make mistakes. You have to understand one much more important thing that every professional athlete knows, and that's that you have to forget it. You have to learn from them, and then you have to put them behind you, because if you're focused on the mistakes, if you're focused on the problems, you can't move forward. And so the great athletes say this, and again, my friend Steve was a great liar, and I used to always remind him of what a big liar he was. He was occasionally offended by that, but by everything. And here's what was great. When he would change his mind, which he did regularly, after a forced march with 1,000 people, we're doing it this way. One day he'd come in and he'd say, now we're doing it this way. And they'd say, but. And he would say, oh, I didn't say that. He would say it over and over again. And they'd say, but you did. We have it written down. And he'd say, So eventually we would shame him into admitting that maybe he said that, because you had it in writing and in blood and thousands of videos and everything else. Then he would say the most important thing. And it was that, as of today, what he was doing was right today for the business. That's it. It's not an albatross. It's not the only way to do things. You have to do what, in the judgment of the leader and the managers and the people running the place, is the best and the rightest thing for the business at the time, and it changes every single day. And so it's understanding that as a strategy that's really critical to innovation as well. I mentioned mistakes. Nobody is perfect. It's learning from the good mistakes, learning from bad mistakes. It's understanding that growing is always tough. And here's an interesting thing. When I was a lawyer for 10 years before I started my first business, I was trying to raise money from a bunch of venture capitalists. They said they don't invest in lawyers. We said, well, I can understand it, but why? What's your reason? And they said, because lawyers believe that they always have to be right, and the game of change and the game of starting new businesses is not about being right, it's about winning. And so you're going to be embarrassed. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be right all the time. But the people who want to win and who have a passion to make these things happen are the people that they wanted to back. So make cheap mistakes, get them behind you, understand that everybody's going to make mistakes. Don't bet the farm. Do these things incrementally. Obviously, much more pivotal in a business that's sort of involved with the health and welfare of people. But all processes can be improved. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly of all, all I hear all day long is technology, technology, technology. What I would tell you is this, and believe me, I have this issue. I have great programmers. If they don't believe in bathing, so be it. I have people who only want to work at night. I have people that only want to work on Wednesdays. Who knows? What we've discovered is that talent is a package. Skill is a package. And you have to take the whole package. And the fact that somebody is fabulous at something tends to be sort of a zero-sum game. That means maybe they don't have all of the other skills, whether they're social skills or whatever they are. You got to take the package. And the best businesses understand this, and the best entrepreneurs don't try to hire 100 people that look exactly like them. They try to hire a team that can be successful. And Willie Sutton, who is a noted philosopher, and some of you know Willie's most famous expression, which was when they asked him why he robbed banks, he said that's because that's where the money is, right? So we all know that. All right. This was his second famous quote, which was that my team doesn't have to love each other. We don't have to all bowl on Thursdays. We don't have to have a kumbaya knitting circle. We just have to do our jobs, and then we can go do whatever we want to do. And it's a false expectation to think anything more. It's a false expectation to think that everybody is going to love anybody or everybody. It's just not the way these things work. The expectation is a meritocracy. The expectation is do your job, okay, and do your job as well as you can do, and work in furtherance of the goals of the team. But understand that this is not our family in a sense. It is familial, but it's a business. And so I really think that notwithstanding that we believe in technology, we spend a great deal of time and money, that ultimately that's not what wins out. What wins out is people. And what wins out, and here's a curve, and this is something that I did so long ago. It was before there was a curve smoothing program in the computer program. So you can see I sort of had to make a thing, and it was all jagged, and it was really embarrassing. And I could probably update it, but it reminds me of how long and ugly this process has been. But anyway, new technologies absolutely are magic. They absolutely are magic. And then one day they're just a given. They're just a commodity. They're something everybody can afford, and we take for granted. The expectations of people and customers are progressive. They constantly expect more. Yesterday's miracles or today's so what? So what differentiates it? People differentiate it. And even more importantly, people who are enthusiastic. And so it's not about money. It's not about big cars. It's not about all of this stuff. We spend a huge amount of our time in our lives working. And the greatest privilege, and the thing that I wish for all of you, is to be able to work in a place that every single day you can come and be enthusiastic about the contribution and the work you're doing. So, thank you very much. Questions? Sure.
So you talked about the quality, the cost, the innovation components. In healthcare, it would seem, to me at least, that are really important. One of the fundamentals is the compassion, caring element. And so where you have a hard edge, as you talked about here, but you want people to demonstrate in terms of their behavior, their actions, etc., a part that also has that very caring, because you're dealing with vulnerable people.
Sure.
Could you speak to that?
Well, we deal with a lot of synagogues and churches and everything else, and so this is a really long story. I'll try to make it as short as possible. My wife volunteered me for the board of my synagogue, okay, and said this would be a good sort of psychic thing for you, and you should have a little more in your life than this. So I became the eventual executive vice president of the synagogue, and my job was negotiating contracts with the clergy. Okay? So when I would appear for services, they would go, keep him away from us. You know, and I would have to negotiate benefits and everything like that. So it wasn't for me a particularly therapeutic process. But what came out of that was understanding budgeting in care organizations, which is, it's not a concrete thing, because you can't turn anybody away. And so we had to develop a whole methodology around the idea that a portion of the budget had to be discretionary, had to be focused to make room for things that aren't numeric and quantifiable. And that was extra people showing up for a meal, people that needed special services, people that couldn't afford dues and things like that. So I think that, you know, when you define your metrics, that's what we really said about the values being absolutely central and dependent on each of the businesses. They simply can't be a formula. And so I think that the care component, compassion, and all of those things are absolutely essential. I mean, it's just a quality standard, and it's just one of the standards that you apply. Can you quantify it exactly? You know, it's hard to quantify creativity. It's hard to quantify a lot of things. But you can measure it. And, you know, we have 360 evaluation. I mentioned we have 5,000 hours of mentoring. But after every single session, we ask both the mentee and the mentor to evaluate the experience. And guess who we don't ask back? We don't ask back the mentees that weren't prepared because they wasted the mentor's time. And we don't ask back the mentors who were just there to sort of tell their own story or toot their own horn or sort of, you know, tell war stories. And that's how we measure performance in that context. These are all volunteers. These are people that think they're doing us a favor. A favor is not enough. A favor is simply not enough. We need to have a result, and the result has to be helpful to the people that we're trying to serve. And so we do the same thing. I mean, we measure things that aren't just quantities and numbers. We measure the quality and all of those kinds of components as well. It's really important. Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thank you very, very much.